The war is over, and the B&O Railroad decided that they needed a newer, more direct route west from Washington. This was apparent during the Civil War when Union troops and supplies had to take the longer primary rail route north or travel along the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal to Point of Rocks, Maryland. The addition of this railway would distribute heavy freight traffic that was congesting the main northern segment, while also expanding its own territory from its fierce competitor, the Pennsylvania Railroad. In 1873, after many delays, the new 42-mile segment, called the Metropolitan Branch, connected the B&O Washington Terminal to its main line at Point of Rocks, Maryland. The Metropolitan Branch added more potential for the B&O connecting to the Southern rail industry through one additional segment, the Georgetown Branch.
The Georgetown Branch begins at Georgetown Junction, so just west of Silver Spring, Maryland, on the Metropolitan Branch of the B&O. There's a series of crossovers and turnouts, and that is the beginning of the Georgetown Branch. The Georgetown Branch was constructed by the B&O Railroad in a series of efforts. Basically, the first section was constructed in around 1892. It was completed to Chevy Chase from the Georgetown Junction. The next section wasn't actually completed until 1908 when they started construction again and built all the way down to Georgetown. The B&O was looking for a route to the south. They wanted to reach the markets to the south, and that was really the impetus for building this branch initially. They wanted to have a connection with the southern railroads. At the time, the Pennsylvania Railroad had a monopoly. The Long Bridge, of course, was a bridge across the Potomac River, and they owned it. Basically, the B&O had to sort of ask permission to use it. They wanted their own route to the south to connect with the southern markets. When they started to build the Georgetown Branch, the railroad, had some financial troubles, and they weren't able to complete it. They basically had to put it on hold. The merchants of Georgetown, they were lobbying the railroad heavily to connect with downtown Georgetown. They wanted to revive the Georgetown waterfront, which at the time, towards the late 1800s, had really sort of fallen into decay. A lot of the buildings were falling down. The markets had kind of shifted as the railroads came into popularity. Georgetown was kind of left behind in many ways. The end of the line for the Georgetown Branch was at the foot of Rock Creek. It went all the way to the end of the line there where there was a coal processing plant where they would deliver coal for the steam generation plant there in Georgetown. In 1920s, they extended the line all the way to the Lincoln Memorial where they did construction, and they delivered stone to the Lincoln Memorial temporarily during the construction. The B&O was a major supplier of these building materials. The Georgetown Branch brought them right to Bethesda, right to Chevy Chase and downtown Georgetown, where you had massive lumber yards, you had large aggregate plants, cement plants, and DC was booming through the 30s, 40s, and 50s. The construction boom. So a lot of the materials came from Georgetown, came from Bethesda, came from Chevy Chase, and it wasn't until the 1970s and 80s when you had a real shift towards further out as the suburbs grew. There was less of a need to have these big plants in Bethesda or in Chevy Chase or in Georgetown for that matter. And you saw these industries move away, to move out or farther out into the suburbs. And so it as the landscape changed, as the sort of society changed, the railroad kind of got moved, not forced out, but it lost its need to be there because there were no more customers. The last customer that the Georgetown Branch had was at the very end of the line. The West Heating Plant in Georgetown, which was a steam generation plant, received coal from the railroad. And the B&O, at that time, there was really nothing left on the branch besides that. And they were, towards the end there, towards the 80s, they were really trying to find a way out. So they started to experiment with trucking in the coal, and then that sort of spelled the end for the railroad. Once they were able to just sort of cover that contract, the railroad was sort of dormant and was eventually abandoned in 1985. I believe the last train went down the branch. And through the 80s, they started to remove track and it eventually became the Crescent Trail.
By 1985, they didn't need the train service anymore, and the railroad abandoned the train service. And we said, this is a really beautiful corridor. We really need to save this. And this was just at the time when the Rails to Trails movement was getting started around the country, and people realized that these rail corridors had tremendous value. And we said, hey, this could be like a bicycle beltway, because it kind of was half of a circle inside the beltway and be the perfect place to ride car-free. And then I was looking at it, I said, well, yeah, but it's not really a beltway, because the belt doesn't go all the way around. It's just sort of half of a beltway. It's more like a crescent. And then we just came up with the idea of we're in the capital city. It's a Capital Crescent. The railroad had ideas that it was a very valuable corridor that potentially they could develop, even though it's only 100 feet wide. They had various ideas that they could develop things along it or merge it into other properties. So they set the price at a very, very high level, like tens of millions of dollars. There were several different jurisdictions. There was a jurisdiction in the city, which was basically all National Park Service land, because it ran along the C&O Canal. And then there was a jurisdiction in Montgomery County, which is Maryland, the Maryland county outside of the city. And so we had to start piecing together both the political coalition to make it happen, to show the decision makers that this would be a great thing for people to have, and the financial coalition to actually raise the money. In the district, we had to go to Congress, because it's a national park, and the only way you can include new land in the national park is through Congress. So we had to go through that whole process, which is somewhat time consuming, and it doesn't always win. And then in Montgomery County, we had to go through the county to see whether the county would be willing to spend money on it. The county was actually very interested in spending money on it, not because they thought they needed a trail. At the time, they didn't realize they needed a trail, and they didn't realize there was that much support for a trail. But they thought maybe they could put a railroad, not a freight railroad, but a light rail trolley line on the corridor to kind of make up for the lost corridor and deal with some of their traffic problems. And so they bought it with that idea in mind. Although, building a trolley is tremendously expensive and needs a tremendous amount of engineering and planning and things like that. And so we said, well, while you're planning your trolley, let's use it as a bike trail.
So sometime in 1987 or maybe early 1988, Peter Harnick and a colleague came to my office at the county council and said, we've got an idea. Nationally, people are thinking about turning these rail lines that are going out of use into hiking and biking, walking, running trails. And I thought, what a great idea. And they were like, we're calling this the Capital Crescent Trail, and it's gonna link, Washington over to Silver Spring and go right through Montgomery County, where I was an elected official. And I'm like, I am all in with you guys. This was the citizens coming to an elected official and pitching their idea, and they completely won me over, and I've been advocating this ever since. It was just a wonderful example of citizen action.
Montgomery County acquired the right-of-way, and Neil Potter, who was the county executive, Bruce Adams, who was on the county council and represented that district as well, thought changing it from just an abandoned railway line to a hiker-biker trail would be a good idea. And I thought so too. I called the Secretary of Transportation from Maryland, a guy named Jim Lighthizer, and I told him about the project, and we made a date for him to come look. It took him less than 5 minutes to say, this is a great idea. I mean, it was a very fast decision by the Secretary of Transportation that jump-started the whole project.
It was difficult to get the money through Congress and time-consuming. And there was a moment when we almost lost the whole thing, that the railroad said they were going to sell it. If Congress couldn't come up with the money, they were going to sell it to somebody else. And a wonderful industrialist, actually, a conservation industrialist, stepped forward and said, I'll buy it. I'll hold it until the government passes the legislation to have the money available. And so he did that, and then they eventually became part of the national park. All these things took time. The initial abandonment was in 85, 86, and the first part of the trail didn't open until about 96, so it took a long time. Railbanking is a super important political decision that was made in Congress in 1983. And it said that we recognize the tremendous value of all these rail corridors. There were 254,000 miles of railroad corridors back around the turn of the century. And now there's about 130,000 miles of active rail corridors. So there's over 100,000 miles that have been abandoned.
Railbanking is a voluntary agreement between a railroad company and a trail sponsor to use an out-of-service rail corridor as a trail until the corridor is needed again for rail service. Railbanking preserves the railroad's right to transfer all forms of ownership to a trail group, which is beneficial to the railroad company because it's able to sell the entire corridor instead of pieces.
The argument for railbanking was we don't know 50 years from now if we might need actual rail lines in those corridors similar to what was operating now, but to keep those corridors alive if somebody, a municipality generally speaking, or some kind of government agency wants to buy them and maintain them for some interim use, that's fine, but at some point in the future we can bring them back into actual railroad use.
So they say it won't be legally abandoned. We're going to be holding it, and it'll be in a rail bank. And that's what we did with this corridor. That's what Montgomery County did with this corridor, us putting it in a rail bank and holding it for possible reactivation. And now they're now they're in the process of reactivating part of it.
In 2017, the interim trail from Bethesda to Western Silver Spring was closed for construction of the Purple Line light rail. Although the Purple Line estimated completion has been delayed to 2027, the Capital Crescent Trail continues to play a vital role in connecting communities and transporting people across the region today. Advocates for rail trails continue to raise awareness for railbanking old corridors in hopes that it will eventually connect the nation.
The Rails to Trails movement is a coming together of a lot of different interests behind an incredibly obvious and exciting idea of basically preserving old corridors for all kinds of modern uses. Some people call it a recycling program, and it is a recycling program. It's recycling old railroad corridors into new uses. Partly because of the Capital Crescent Trail, there's already a continuous corridor from Washington, D.C. to Pittsburgh. I mean, there's really kind of two visions that fit well together. One vision is a coast-to-coast trail that you could actually, dip your tire or dip your shoelaces in the Atlantic Ocean and go all the way to the Pacific Ocean in a car-free way. The other vision is a tightly interconnected web of trails in metropolitan areas so that you can go pretty much all the places you want to go in the metropolitan area without needing a car or without being frightened and pushed off the road by car traffic. So it's the little web and the national reach.